Hello everyone, I'm Francesca Tabor and I'm delighted to be joined by Rob May, who is an investor in AI startups. He has invested in over 100 AI companies and is a full-time founder. So thank you so much for joining me today and really looking forward to delving into your background.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So before we delve into your illustrious career, can you tell us a little bit about your background, growing up in Kentucky, and how you made your way over to the East Coast to New York and Boston?
Yeah, well, I went to the University of Kentucky, so huge college basketball fan, go Wildcats. And when I graduated, I went down to, so I was a computer chip designer, and at the time I graduated, it was not a very popular career path for tech people. So I moved down to Florida and worked in the space and defense industry, where there's some of that work to be done. Then after a couple years down there, I moved back to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was from, and worked for two startups there. One of those startups ran out of money during the financial crash of '08, and during that time, I started a company that took me to Boston. That company raised money from General Catalyst and First Round Capital and Avalon Ventures. So we looked around at places we should, move, because the company was only 4 people at the time, and then we ended up choosing Boston.
Great. And was that Backupify?
Yes.
And so that was one of Jason Calacanis' first investments.
Yeah, I think we were his third ever angel investment.
And he found you guys.
Yeah, we December of 2009, I think we were featured on Tech Republic, which got us on Tech Meme, and Jason read about us and tracked me down and called me. So
that's super cool, and that's how I met you maybe a year ago, but I watched that episode because I was obsessed with all of his speaking stuff. So really kind of ironic. And he's invested in Uber and Robinhood, so obviously knows a good thing when he sees it. But what was the key sort of, talk us through your first startup and all of the pivots that you made, kind of move from ideating, working on the product, and then finally finding product market fit, and then raising capital?
Yeah, so I am not a surveyor. A lot of times you'll see, startups before they get started will go out and they'll survey 100 customers or whatever. I think if you don't have something to put in front of people, I think you get bad information. So we don't do that side. We just start building stuff and try to build as cheaply as possible and kind of iterate from there. And so with Backupify, we built initially a Flickr backup tool for consumer Flickr.
I still have photos on Flickr and I can't access them.
Yeah, well, the tool doesn't do that anymore, doesn't back it up. But that was part of the idea, was that you might lose access to those things. Then we started adding more and more tools. It was a consumer product, it was still really slow to get off the ground. The first year we signed up maybe 2,000 users. But then when we got featured on TechMeme, we signed up 10,000 people that day.
Wow.
And it started to take off from there. We were signing 30, 40, 50,000 people up every month.
So it was a freemium.
Yeah, it's a freemium model. And then it became clear to us in mid-2010 that all the people that were paying us were actually small businesses. And so we decided to lean into that and move the company away from the consumer market to small business market, and then eventually an enterprise market. If we kept the consumer product around for another 2 years before we finally shut it down, but you couldn't sign up for it new. So it was just
interesting. Okay, and then tell us about your journey as a first-time founder, working with investors, board of advisors. Were they beneficial to your growth, or did you find that they were was that a struggle to kind of adapt to working with them?
I think initially I thought it was not worth my time to interact with them and spend a lot of time just feeling like I wish they'd just leave me alone, let me do my thing. Then I eventually got an executive coach, and the coach kind of walked me through hey, here's how you keep your board off your back. Proactively tell them what they need to know, and all that kind of stuff. And so I think I probably went from almost losing my job as CEO in the beginning to having pretty good reviews by the time.
Awesome. And so when you exited that with angel investing your next venture, how did you decide what kind of tech trend to go into? Because at the time it was AI, IoT, blockchain. How did you land on AI?
A couple of things. So I read all the blockchain papers. I really didn't get it. Later, a couple years ago, I did buy some Bitcoin in, which turned out to be a good, investment. I got lucky on that. But we
Did you spend it or did you keep it?
No, I spent it, and I sold out of it. I sold out of everything
Buy?
crypto related in 2019. But I bought it at $400 Bitcoin in 2019. 29, I did flirt a little bit with crypto for 2017, 2018. I wanted to try to understand it. I just don't believe that it's ever going to amount to anything serious. So I sold out of everything and stopped investing there. And then I actually, my first attempt at another company was a corporate messaging app. So Slack was new and it was kind of popular, starting to grow. And I thought corporate messaging was a good problem that needed to be solved. I think it still needs to be solved. I don't think Slack has solved it.
Right.
And it turned out to be, we had this idea that if you could send some context with the email, like,
okay,
why are you getting this email? Do I need to notify you of something? Do I need a response from you?
Right.
Do I? And
so it has that kind of racy.
yeah, we try to, yeah, exactly.
Embedded.
Yeah, and for those watching, RACI, RACI is the accountability model. For that, and so so that was the idea. But what it turns out is the way people use email didn't fit with that, because it was, I might send something to you because I need your response, and I copy this person, but then the other, just as an FYI, but then they respond and need a response from me, and so like the whole thing got super confusing, and we never could solve it. Yeah, no, it was. We were trying to build, an email client, a web-based email client that would have these features, but it was still too hard.
And that incorporated AI at the time, so this is obviously
No, it did incorporate AI.
Okay.
But about that time, so Backupify got acquired in 2015, and I think it was around the same time that Google's Word Vector paper came out, where they gave this famous example that you could do math with words. So they said king minus man plus woman equals what, and the machine spit out queen, and that impressed everybody, and started to realize, like, wow, what could we do with AI and language
and vector databases in general.
I think vector databases came a little bit later.
Okay, so at the time it was natural language processing, computer vision, edge AI. Were there any specialisms that you were kind of looking into?
My thesis was that NLP was going to go through the transformation that machine vision had gone through, and it's just going to be a couple years later. And so that's why I started my second company. Tala was in the NLP space, focused on customer support chatbots.
And you've always been particularly good at kind of predicting what trends are coming up. So how is that beneficial as an investor, and how do you get the timing right as a founder, but B, also as an investor, picking which ones to choose? And I think it's beneficial to be ahead of the hype curve, rather than, now everyone's investing in AI and every startup wants to add AI to their pitch deck. So
yeah, I think you have to be in a market as it's going through that transition to really be able to understand and take advantage of it, right? If you wait too late before it all settles in, a lot of times you don't have that native understanding of why it evolved the way that it did. So I think it's important to get out there early and be part of that, but you have to be careful about how long it might take to monetize, because when you introduce spaces, people don't have an idea for what they're going to pay or how they should pay, or what pricing and packaging should look like, or sometimes who's the buyer. And so a lot of the questions that, I think investors in general prefer to invest in established markets that are getting some new type of software or whatever, where you at least know the market, rather than some new type of idea or new role.
Okay, that makes sense. So now as we enter into the generative AI era with large language models, we've got, OpenAI's GPT with the application ChatGPT. We've got Google's Bard, we've got Anthropic's Claude, Meta's Llama models. How do you see this kind of large language model space evolving, from maybe large language models to small language models? And also, do you see that is there space for industry specific large language models, so like finance GPT or legal or healthcare? And then if that does occur, what does that mean for organizations? How can they stay competitive if everyone has access to the same knowledge, and you have sort of diminishing specialization?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the foundation models are not going to make it as standalone businesses, at least from a returns perspective. I mean, they might continue to exist, but I don't think they'll be great venture scale returns. And I think that's because what you're going to find is companies' data privacy needs and the fact that a lot of their use cases are going to be more specific are going to tend towards fine tuning their own models on data sets that they have for themselves. And that's going to be made easier by the fact that, like, when you get to GPT-5 and GPT-6 and GPT-7, like at some point for your use case, like even now, some people use older APIs, GPT-3.5 API, say, instead of GPT-4. Okay, well, the better the tools get, the more an older, cheaper tool or an open source version might serve your needs. So, I think it's going to be hard to make money as a foundation model company, and I do think you're going to see more smaller language models.
So you're going to start closing these.
Unfortunately, there's no way to do that in the private markets, but and then I think there's a lot of I think a lot of the small language model stuff is going to take off. I mean, people, if you look at humans, you don't have to show a newborn, or you don't have to show a toddler like 5,000 coffee cups before they know what a coffee cup is. You show them 3 or 4 examples, and so they're good at generalizing. And I think we're going to figure out ways to do that in models so they work both plus data.
Fascinating. Great. And then as we move towards AI agents and agentic systems, sort of maybe automating tasks, and we defer a lot of our decision making to AI. So either we're consulting AI, or we're just the human in the loop, kind of providing quality control. What is your advice for organizations who are starting to look at using AI for decision making? And you see that there may be risks in, say, healthcare or more, larger applications, say like a city that's run with AI?
Yeah, I think people are already starting to see with this phase of generative AI a lot of the problems, and that's why we haven't moved more from a lot of these early proposals and projects and pilots to more well-established, use cases. There's still too many errors and there's still too many problems, and a lot of times if you need a human there to sort of like make sure, as a backstop, you lose the ROI benefits in the technology in the first place.
Okay.
Because it becomes, too expensive. And so I think a lot of companies are thinking about it the right way, which is they're experimenting with things, but I think the challenge for the industry is that, and the reason so many AI startups are struggling is that companies aren't seeing the gains they expected yet. I have no doubt that'll come, but I think the technology is going to be more advanced.
Great. And then as we look at chip design and chip manufacturing, I know you've invested in NVIDIA, and they manufacture their chips over in Taiwan. But we will see new types of AI workloads for robotics, smart cities. Do you think that GPUs will suffice? And who do you think will be the leaders in that space as we move to new architectures? Do you think they'll still remain NVIDIA, or do we have, Google,
I mean, I think it'll be NVIDIA, but I think it'll be NVIDIA through acquisition, because like, even if you look at their latest, the latest chip that, like, as we're recording this, they had a problem 2 or 3 weeks ago with their latest chip that it's sort of behind schedule and it's harder to manufacture than they thought. It's a challenge for TSMC. It's a challenge for NVIDIA. And so I think they're going to need to move away from some of the GPU architectures that they have towards neuromorphic, analog crossbar array, other types of.
Can you explain what those are?
So neuromorphic chips are chips that mimic usage in the brain. So there've been a couple of ways. So there've been a couple types that people have tried, things like spiking neuron chips, where the signal sort of spikes similar to how a neuron would do it, and then chips with circuit elements that are uncommonly used, like the resistors.
Okay.
I don't know if anything like that has made it into large scale production, but I know some people work on things like that. And then an analog crossbar array doesn't use anything digital. So it's just like, you can think of it as just like a lattice work of traces that carry voltages.
Okay.
And the voltage can move around there, and it doesn't have to be gated through a transistor. And so it's much faster, and it, in use cases where you just need an approximation, you don't need digital precision, analog circuitry can be much faster.
Fascinating. And for designing these new chips, would you use quantum computing for new forms of materials? How are we going to get, all of these?
I think just the next wave of chips is just going to be able to come from new computer architectures in and of themselves. So to give you an example, a lot of the reasons chips get better is because they move down this curve of what's called process nodes, where the process nodes have names like 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer, they get smaller and smaller. And a lot of these, but all those process nodes are built around one type of computer architecture called the von Neumann architecture, named after John von Neumann, who, is one of the early computing pioneers. And what you find is that there's actually lots of other ways to do compute. And so when you look at something like analog crossbar array, it can be, you might be able to manufacture a chip at an older process node, technology from 4 years ago, that can still outperform a modern GPU at a higher process node. So that tells me that new computing architectures will probably get the next wave of performance and unlock. And then after that, we'll probably have to move to new materials and other kinds of things.
Great. And then as we look at energy usage, training GPT-3, that was approximately the same amount of energy consumption as. So how are we going to support the exponential, curve of AI growth?
Well, I think a lot of what's driving these chip designs and innovations are not just better performance, but and the ability to handle higher models, but like the ability to get the same level of performance at much lower power. So if you take, like, I'm an investor in a company called Mythic uses like 1/100th the power of a GPU for similar performance level. And so I think as those things, make their way into the market at scale, well, I mean, you're still going to be doing more and more AI, so your aggregate power needs are going to be going up, but there's going to be some drag holding that down through improvements in model performance, improvements in, new types of low power chips and stuff like that. And then obviously, I mean, it's why people are trying to work on solar energy and nuclear and windmills and all these other power sources.
Windmills.
Yeah, whatever.
Old school. Great. So you describe yourself as a trade-off believer rather than a techno-optimist. You're quite cynical about things like AGI. So a lot of AI is overhyped. But are there some elements that you think are particularly overhyped, or some elements that are underhyped right now?
I think the AGI stuff's really overhyped. I mean, everybody has made a big deal about this situational awareness paper that came out, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I think there have been some really good takedowns of it, right? The premise of the paper is, hey, we're closer to AGI than you think, and the rest of you don't understand it because you're not in the middle of the situation like we are in San Francisco at the top AI labs. And I think the people that are writing these things think this way don't have a good track record with technology. They tend to overhype things. And in that paper, a lot of things that were stated, they make statements that they don't back up, like, GPT-3 was as good as blah, now GPT-4 is as good as a high schooler. And you're like, well, it is on some questions. It's not generally as good as a high schooler.
Right.
And so
it's not emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, and there's still subjects that it's not very good at. So I think you're going to see, I think it's much further off than we think.
So as an investor, you've moved away from investing early stage AI companies to slightly later stage. Is that a natural progression, or is this because it's harder for early stage startups to get the right talents, pay for compute, get access to data?
Yeah, for me, it's just more of a personal choice where, when you invest in a pre-seed or kind of angel funded startup, I mean, most of your time is just spent trying to help them get in front of beta customers who can test out the product and, hire their first engineer or whatever. And I'd really just rather at this point in my life work on more interesting problems that later stage companies deal with, like, geographic expansion, new channel expansion, launching a second product for your company, whether you should perform, small scale M&A. So I find those to be much more interesting problems than like, hey, let me introduce you to my friend over here who could be your beta tester.
And I know that outside of investing in AI, you take an interest in health and fitness, you take good care of yourself, you look very young for your age. As a consumer, but also as an investor, what sort of products would you like to enter into the market, whether it's AI or otherwise?
Well, I think on the health side, you really are going to need. There's all these anti-aging pills and systems and whatever. No. But I think it's very confusing, right, in the market. And you want to be careful because people don't realize like too much broccoli is bad for you, right? Like too much. The Wall Street Journal ran an article recently about people who drink too much water and your sodium gets diluted and you get headaches and you get problems and you have to go to the hospital. And so like too much of anything can be bad for you. And so if you start mixing these things, we don't know how they're going to end up. And
too much coffee and sugar.
Yeah, or you end up with too much vitamin B6, right? And that could be problematic. So I think systems that start to filter these things down and help people make decisions.
More personalized, do you think, health?
Yeah, or even just
start testing, their bloods and their
and even a level simpler than that. Just basically saying like, if you take this one, you don't need to take these other two, because I'm not even sure people know that. I think people try to take all of this. Yeah,
my dad took like 3 different forms of magnesium in his face balloon.
Yeah,
this was a COVID thing. So thank you so much, Rob. This was an excellent interview. I learned so much. I'm sure our audience as well. So where can they reach out to you? What's coming up next? Do you have any parting words?
If you want to follow me, I write a newsletter at investinginai.substack.com. So hopefully check it out. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.